is the other one. So, welcome back. We're continuing with going through the Iowa and Nebraska rules of conduct in Sioux City, Iowa, on November 9th, 2012. And this morning's part of the program about rules 1.0 through 1.12. Then we also talked about the advertising rules this afternoon, which recently changed. And in the next 2 hours, we're going to, even though we still have 2 hours, we'll have to talk out, because we probably won't get quite 2 hours. But we'll be starting with rule 1.13 and continuing on. So after 2 hours, we still haven't finished rule 1. So again, that covers a lot of that area. But rule 1.13 talks about the situation of an organization being your client. And of course, just substantive law of corporations and agencies is that you represent the organization, not individuals therein. But this rule poses a couple of obligations. Namely, that if somebody is somebody within the organization is perhaps a little confused, they're an employee of the company and they think that you are their lawyer and you're not their lawyer, you have to clear up that understanding and that. But there might be some situation where you represent both the corporation and persons within the corporation. But when you do, keep in mind that there's a conflict like any time that you're working more than one person. So that's exactly what you're required to do. Now, as we'll talk about, you have an obligation to protect the organization. I think if somebody is doing something illegal and especially runs liabilities on behalf of the company, you might have an obligation to put up to that by bringing in the attention of somebody up in the corporation. I have to do it. If it's somebody I am up in the corporation who's doing it, you might actually have an obligation to turn in your client. So, for example, you're a member of the company and you learn that somebody is dumping toxic waste for a company. Instead of disposing of it properly, they dump it in the roadside. And the fine for doing that is $1 million a day. So you get to the attention of the company president and they don't know about it. We have everything under control. Well, every day that guy continues to do that, it's another $1 million fine. So it's not in your company's best interest to be doing that. So you might, and I wouldn't do this on a whim, but you might have an obligation to call the EPA and say, my client is breaking the law, because that, will run up a fine for the previous days, but at least you'll stop it in the future. Now, again, don't do that whim, but this rule gives you the authority to do that.
Unless you're in Nebraska.
Well, no, even in Nebraska, you may do it.
May, that's not required.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, now normally, as we will learn that once your client fires you, you're fired. There's some exceptions. They can't keep doing it; they have to be fired. But the corporation might have one final duty. If you get fired for being a whistleblower, again, there's an obligation because you discovered this misconduct going on in your company, and it's a huge corporation you work for, and you bring it to the attention of the person that you report to, and he says, well, I'm shocked that there's illegality going on. By the way, you're fired, and we're going to keep doing it. Well, in that situation, even though you're fired, you might have one final obligation to go to the man at the top of the company and let them know about it, because their firing was actually illegal because you're being fired for doing something illegal. That's a special rule having an organization as a client. Another special class of client, diminished capacity. And for webcast viewers, our first code word this hour of the program is diminished, as in diminished capacity. And in general, the obligation client with diminished capacity is the same as it would be for any other client. We want to as much as possible, maintain a normal attorney-client relationship. But in some situations, there might be some special requirements. You might have to take some special action. And what is codified in this rule? Hi, were you here this morning?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. Just wanted to make sure you got the material. one thing that's kind of codified in here is another exception to confidentiality. So if your client has diminished capacity, and that might be grounds for violating confidentiality. So for example, if you run-of-the-mill client, and they are going to send a bunch of money to, they got an email from somebody in Nigeria to send a bunch of money, and they're going to do that just because they're not they're not too wise. Well, Rule 1.2 says if they want to do that, you can't stop them. On the other hand, if you think they are doing that because of their diminished capacity, because of the age, mental capacity, or whatever, well, in that situation, you might want to take some action to protect your client. And one of the actions that you might take to protect your client would be to let other people in their family know what's going on, for example. Even though in a normal situation, that would violate confidentiality. So here there's an exception, and it says you may take those steps to protect them. Not really required to, but you're authorized. But still, you have to keep your client's best interest in mind. Take care of who you disclose it to. They've had a hostile relationship with family member, well, you disclose it to that family member. Rule 1.15 talks about we need to safeguard a client's property. And there's probably about one sentence in here that just says, in general, be careful of your client's property. The reason this goes on very extensively is because we're talking about trust account rules and so forth. We'll talk a little bit about those, and then I'll point you to where you can find the full details. In general, in fact, it starts out talking about the trust account rules, not until later on that we get into the just general, be careful with your client's property. But in general, if you handle client funds in any way, those funds have to go in your trust account. And that's kind of the golden rule. The corollary of that golden rule is that your money has to be in the trust account, with a couple of very minor exceptions. So anytime you are putting money that belongs to somebody else, it has to be in a trust account. And we'll talk in a minute about the two kinds of trust accounts, but normally it's the pooled trust account. And any belongs to a client has to go in there. We'll explain specifics of that in a minute. And again, your money cannot be in the trust account, with the exception of amounts that are reasonably necessary to cover service charges and money that belongs to you and the client jointly. So obviously the most common example of money belonging to you and the client is you get the settlement check. You get a check for $9,000. $6,000 belongs to the client, $3,000 belongs to you, just one piece of paper. So that has to go in the trust account while it's dispersed. The amounts that are reasonably necessary to cover service charges is the only other exception to that. We'll talk about the requirements for banks on these accounts. But in general, the bank is allowed to charge a monthly service charge. And I'll talk in a minute about why they don't a lot of times, which is a good thing. So the bank has a $1 a month service charge for operating your trust account. Well, it's reasonable for you to put $20 in your trust account of your money, cover the service charge for next month. And probably reasonable to put $6 there to cover the service charge for the next 3 months. Maybe reasonable probably to put $100 there to cover the service charge for the next 5 months. But it's probably not reasonable to put $1,000 in there to cover it for the next 50 months, because that's not reasonably necessary to cover that. Now, the reason why that's important to know is because for your personal checking account, and for even your office account, well, there's some people out there just not really good at math. You thought you had $100 in the account, turns out you only had 90. So when you wrote that check for $91, it bounced. So, some people have it. So it's a reasonable thing to do with your personal checking account is just kind of keep a little cushion in there, So, never let the balance dip below $500 or whatever. So you have this little cushion. That's a reasonable thing to do. But you can't do that with your trust account because the cushion would leave your money in the trust account, which the rule prohibits. So you can't do that. You have to watch out for that. So the moral of the story is you just need to be very careful with your trust account because you can't just keep a cushion in there. And you never want to write a bad check on your trust account, no matter what. Because, as we'll see in a minute, in most states, the rule governing trust accounts is that the bank is required to notify the office regulating lawyers in your state anytime that happens. And I don't know exactly what happens if that office gets such a notice, but I don't want to, because that's probably not a pleasant thing to happen. So, you have to be good at math. You have to be careful. If money does become your property, like you deposited an advance return and the money becomes yours, you have to withdraw it within a reasonable time. You can't just leave it lingering in there. You have to make a written accounting, and you have to notify anybody who received money belonging to them. Okay, tangible securities and tangible property. The gold bricks that you got, that you have over as part of the court settlement or whatever, they have the label property and place deposit or other place of safekeeping. So if gold, probably wants to have a safe deposit box. If it's the old silverware, well, you can probably lie it in your file cabinet in your office. Now, I routinely have. I don't have too many valuable pieces of property in my practice. But if you routinely did that, I would make sure you had a safe deposit box. And not just your own personal safe deposit box. In fact, Wisconsin, it turns out, is quite specific on that. That if you have a safe deposit box for holding clients' property, it has the name on the box or the name on the signature card, whatever, has to be, so-and-so law office trust account. You have to have the words trust account right on the box. Now, as far as I know, that's not a requirement in Minnesota, Iowa, or Nebraska. But if you were doing that on a regular basis, you might take Wisconsin's lead, make sure that it is a segregated safe deposit box. In theory, I have a safe deposit box with the deed for my house, or the front I have my personal stuff, and the back of the box, I put my client's property, and I guess I'm not going to name them. But since at least one state has a very specific provision on that, it might not be a bad idea to have a separate box. So especially if you deal with that sort of thing on a regular basis. Advance fees, anytime somebody advances you your fee, that has to be put in your trust account and withdrawn unless you followed all the provisions of Rule 1.5 and you have a written advance fee agreement. It is possible to have I will charge you $500 for this will, but you have to make sure that you comply very specifically with that, because then the money, as long as you comply with Rule 1.5,